when the confetti drops in Atlanta, Georgia, who's going to be crowned the national champion? Welcome into the Hard Count. We're going to crown our own national champion or make our prediction for the national championship on this very show. We got national title picks for you. We got college football playoff field picks for you. We got conference title picks for you. We're going to cover everything and anything when it comes to calling our shot on prediction week finale right here on this show, the People's College Football Show, the Hard Count. Welcome in. It is August 1st. 2024, Thursday, August 1st, 2024, the last one on the face of the planet. So we're so glad to have y'all here. We're going to make it a great one. We got a lot to get into today. So I don't want to waste too much time because I just mentioned we're going to pick our ACC winner, our Big 12 winner, our Big 10 winner, who's winning the SEC, who's winning the Big 10. And then also, when it comes to that, like which of those teams that don't win the conference championship are going to find their way into the 12-team dance? Because Andy Staples has been saying it for the better part of the last few months. We've had to retrain our brains. And for the better part of the last few weeks, I've been trying to retrain my brain and get a gauge for who's going to end up making this 12-team field, even if they do have, 2 losses. If they drop a crucial game at the end of the season, if they lose the conference title game. There's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to unpack. So a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. One, as soon as we get off the air here, I'm doing an Ask Me Anything over at the Reddit College Football page. So go check that out. I'll make sure that we have the link accessible for y'all as well so you can get in there and we can chop it up and talk college football. So big shouts to the folks at Reddit for making that happen and excited to talk some ball. Also, make sure you are subscribed, but you already make sure you're subscribed to the show. Make sure you're subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel. We're about to jump headfirst into the beautiful thing that is college football season. You got NFL preseason action tonight. Nice little appetizer for week 0 of college football right around the corner, 23 days away, but who's really counting? If you're listening on podcast, we say it a lot. Thank you, because you made time to consume college football content, even though you couldn't catch it live on the YouTube page. So thank you for that. If you're listening via podcast, leave a review and tell us what you're doing while you listen. We appreciate that. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the feed. Just double check you're subscribed to the feed. We would be very grateful for that. Now, speaking of being grateful, I didn't want to make too many notes to communicate this to y'all at the top of the show, but this feels like the right time to do it. Thank you for allowing us to do this for a job. Thank you for allowing us to talk about college football every single day from this desk to you in your living room, at your office job, whatever you're doing. Thank you for giving us this opportunity because I'll just say I do not take this for granted for a second. Did not study broadcasting in college. I studied hotel administration. Did not do any journalism. Like the fact that we're in this position is hilarious. It is beautiful. It is wonderful. And if you could have asked me a couple of years ago what my dream job was, I would have drawn up something that looks very, very similar, if not exactly like this. So thank you for that. We're very grateful for y'all because y'all are the ones that make this show go, that make this show happen, and that really make this program the college football sicko community that it is. So thank you for that. Cannot communicate that too many times. And as we jump into a new year of college football, a new era of college football, really, with the 12-team playoff and other things like that, we're going to make sure that with how we do this show, we're going to make sure that you know how grateful we are in terms of the effort we put into it. All right? So, no better way to start our prediction finale than with the ACC. So, who's winning the ACC? I think when you look at the overall landscape of this conference, there is 3 big dogs from a roster talent level, from Florida State to Clemson to Miami. And then you also have a bunch of sneaky teams that could totally just killer whale style breach and find a way to end up winning this conference. We'll get back to those big dogs in a second, but who would be those killer whales? I think NC State, as long as Dave Doran is running that operation out there, they're going to be a tough out. Just period, point blank. Grayson McCall, they got him from Coastal Carolina, the transfer portal quarterback. He could make all the difference with Robert and I if he is more similar to what they wanted Brennan Armstrong to be. Kind of sounds harsh, but it's true. The schedule for them is very workable. They're at Clemson, but there's no Florida State. There's no Miami. There's a path there for NC State. Virginia Tech, it feels like we've been on Virginia Tech now really since those returning production rankings came out. They finished the year extremely hot, winning 5 of their last 7. They have the most returning production in all of college football. They have a freaking Clydesdale in Kyron Drones at quarterback. That dude can hurt you running the football, can hurt you downfield. Their schedule also very workable. They get Clemson in November in Blacksburg. Before that, though, they play Miami, and you're like, hey, got to go to Coral Gables, and I say to Coral Gables. You got to go play at Miami. Do you really like that? I like it a lot more than it's on a Friday night. So Virginia Tech could absolutely find a way to backdoor their way into this ACC conference title game. Syracuse, don't look now, man, but Syracuse, Fran Brown is cooking out there in upstate New York. You got Oronde Gadsden, who's one of the best tight ends, one of the best pass catchers in college football, period. We don't talk a lot about him nationally because he plays at Syracuse, but I think we're going to talk a lot about him this upcoming season. Kyle McCord, say what you want about what happened to him at Ohio State, man. All he did in Columbus was win football games as a starting quarterback. Now, he lost the one that was most important to the folks out there in Buckeye country, but it is what it is. He's going to be a guy for you. They have a top 10 portal class currently at Syracuse. All right, so just keep an eye on Syracuse, man. Their schedule also very, very workable. SMU, first year in the conference. They won the AAC last year. Do they win the ACC this year? I mean, Vegas would say probably not, but you look at what they have on this roster, man. They also hit the portal pretty hard. They took 20-plus transfers, and not just like transfers from the FCS level or other G5 schools. They took them from like high-profile schools, like big boy, blue-chip kind of recruiting operations. All right, you got Preston Stone playing quarterback for you yet again. Rhett Lashley is an offensive mastermind, averaged 37 points a game so far his 2 years at SMU. Do not be surprised if SMU makes some noise in this conference, all right? So I mentioned all those sneaky teams. I think when we talk about, the Virginia Techs of the world, the Syracuses of the world, making a run at the conference title, while the path is definitely there, to me, the ingredients for that to happen would require one of these big dogs, if not multiple of these big dogs, having a downward trend. And I think it's quite frankly the exact opposite for two of these three teams. Like Clemson, say what you want about Cade Klubnik, and I'm very much so in need to see it to believe it mode for the good folks out there in Clemson, South Carolina. But at the exact same time, man, their roster, they're going to be good enough to roll the ball out there and win most of their games just because they're Clemson and the way they've recruited and the way that they have continued to keep a steady influx of top talent on that roster. I understand that Clemson hasn't been making the college football playoff every other year, but they're still going to be a force, and they're still going to be a tough out in this conference. Florida State, they actually have the best odds to win this conference, even though they are 83rd in returning production. There's a feeling out there in Tallahassee, man, they think they have the best roster they've ever had under Mike Norvell. And last year was great. You went undefeated in the regular season. You won the ACC. They think this roster is more talented than that roster. So again, that to me would make it a little bit difficult for a other team, the ones I just mentioned, the sneaky teams, to find a way to get into that conference title game over a Florida State. Now, Miami is fascinating because they have built to a year like this. Last year going 7-5, you're like, we sure they're a conference title contender? Yes, because the way the roster has trended, that's the first part of this. But also, you got Cam Ward playing quarterback for you, man. I cannot articulate adequately enough how excited they are about him and how much of a difference maker they believe he is. So you got the roster talent, and then also you got a year 3 culture. Like Mario Cristobal, since he's gotten to Coral Gables, has been working to get this team to take on his persona. Tough, gritty, physical, do the work, detail-oriented, all those things. They haven't seen that play out just yet, but if you're trusting the trend, I think Miami is barreling full speed towards being a Cristobal team in 2024. So who ends up making the conference title game for the ACC? Who ends up playing for an auto bid to the college football playoff? I love Clemson's defense. I think Barrett Carter might be one of the most underrated. And I say underrated in terms of he doesn't get talked about enough nationally. He's one of my favorite players defensively in college football. I'll leave it at that, the linebacker at Clemson. But again, offensively, I don't know if I can trust Cade Klubnik in this operation just yet. Not telling you I don't think Cade Klubnik is really freaking talented. Not telling you that it would wildly surprise me if they found a way to make the ACC title game. But from what we've seen from him so far, last year, 19 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Not all that is on Cade Klubnik. Some of that is also on the lack of explosivity they don't have in that wide receiver room. Probably have more of it this year. Is it enough to get over the hump? To me, I would have a difficult time predicting them to make the ACC title game because of what I haven't seen on offense just yet. They averaged 4.9 yards a play last year, good for 103rd in the country. I don't think that's enough to make the ACC title game if they don't kick it up in a big way this upcoming season. So I think you got Florida State and Miami in the ACC title game. Now, Florida State, again, the best odds to win the conference. Miami has the third best odds behind Clemson to win the conference. I think that Florida State feels like they got something to prove. I think they are very, very okay with everyone talking about what they lost and DJU maybe not being the guy based on his lack of success at Clemson and all that. Like, I think they're more than fine taking on like that underdog chip on the shoulder role. Promise you now, those folks in Tallahassee, the guys in that building, they remember vividly not making the college football playoff last year. Like that has stuck with them, okay? I think that motivates them. I think that benefits them to get to the ACC title game. I think they get to the conference title game with one loss, and that one loss coming against Miami. Now, Miami, I think, actually gets to the ACC title game going undefeated in conference play. So who ends up winning this game, man? It's very difficult to beat a team twice if you're Miami, but I think the versatility of this roster, what they have up front, what they have in that backfield with Damian Martinez from Oregon State, what they have on the perimeter now with Sam Brown, with Xavier Restrepo and JoJo Trader, like Jacoby George, they just have so many different ways they can beat you. I think that it could look different from game to game, from when they play in the regular season to when they meet up in the conference title game. But I think Miami finds a way to go 2-0 against Florida State and win the ACC. So what happens to Florida State? Do they make the college football playoff? I mean, stick around. But I think Miami is your ACC champ, and they lock themselves into a college football playoff spot and a bye in the 12-team playoff. So let me know what y'all think, man. That's our shot. We're calling it now. We think that Miami is your ACC champ. And, I mean, the folks out there at Miami, that would just be like, I mean, that's like Shawshank when Andy Dufresne finally gets out of the prison and feels the rain on his face. Like, that would be the vibe for the folks at Miami. Because they've heard so much about year after year, hey, this is the year, this is the year, this is the year. And then actually, once it finally is your year to win the conference, like that would just be, that would be validating for everyone out there at the U. So from the ACC to the Big 12, let's call our shot in the Big 12 right now, man. Who's winning this conference? This conference now, as much as we missed the Pac-12, and man, rest in peace to the Pac-12, brother. Like that conference was phenomenal and unique to college football, in the sense that you could be dialed in to Oregon State and, I mean, let's just call it Oregon State and UCLA at 10 o'clock Eastern and go all the way till 2 a.m. And a lot of your friends now are winding down from their Saturday, finishing up their plans, and you are locked and loaded into a Pac-12 conference game that's going till 2 a.m. That's the beautiful thing about it. The entertainment value was second to none. And while the Big 12 may not have the late kick times the same as the Pac-12 did, the Big 12, I think, is going to be our, I don't want to say our substitute, but it's going to be the most entertaining conference in college football. How's that for you? Literally, anyone can win this conference. Like, you lose Oklahoma, you lose Texas to the SEC, and I think there's this thought out there that the conference isn't as talented anymore. I don't know if that's true. I just think it's a very, very small margin between every single team in this conference. Like, talk about Utah being the favorite to win the conference. Kansas State right there behind them. Arizona has the 7th best odds to win this conference, and they bring back 66% production from last year's squad, including one of the best wide receivers in college football in Tetairoa McMillan and their quarterback Noah Fafita, and they won 10 football games last year. I understand it's a new head coach, but still, man, like to have Arizona at 7th best odds, that I think should speak volumes to how difficult this conference will be to win. So I think that they just beat each other up, man. Like, spoiler alert here for our college football playoff field, it's going to be a little bit later in the show. I think you only get one team out of the Big 12 in the college football playoff. And so when I was breaking down this conference, man, the approach I took to it was the groupings of teams and trying to label those groups. So I think you have a gritty group, which is Iowa State, Utah, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and a quarterback group. Quarterback group being the teams with quarterbacks that could, quite frankly, just take over during the course of a season, and maybe the roster doesn't make the most sense. Maybe they don't look like an outfit that's going to be a Big 12 title contending roster, but the quarterback's like, hey, I'm him. That's the way the thing is going to go. That's why we end up making our way to Jerry World. And those teams are UCF, Arizona, Kansas. Colorado is maybe a bit more of a stretch, but they have the best quarterback in the conference, I believe, so we'll go ahead and put them in that group. Let's start with the gritty group, man. And gritty group, not like the Justin Jefferson dance, though that is, I mean, if you can pull that off, more power to you. This is the group that is well-coached, tough, more often than not going to have really solid returning production numbers. Kansas State kind of the exception to that, as they only bring back 37% production from last year's offense, but the defense is right around 80%. So all these teams are going to just be a pain to play, man. They're going to be a pain to play. Like I mentioned returning production, Utah, Iowa State, Oklahoma State are all top 20 in that category. It's going to be brutal. The quarterback group, like I just mentioned, UCF, Arizona, Kansas, Colorado, again, it may not meet the eye test when you look at that roster in July, or I guess now we're in August, but when you actually have to play them, it might just be a thing where it's like, hey, man, Jalen Daniels, we had it schemed up. We had the quarterback spy, and it's like, yeah, but he's special. KJ Jefferson, same deal. He was doing that in the SEC a few years ago, and now he does it in the Big 12. I could see it happening. I think everybody, like I just said, beats up on everybody. I think it is just absolutely back and forth. I think you have multiple teams with 2 to 3 losses. With that being said, though, I think the most stable, high-floor team that we have is exactly who Vegas says we have. And maybe it's a little bit boring, but sometimes boring is eventually the right answer. I think Utah ends up finding their way to the Big 12 title game. All right? I love the way they're built. I love their head coach, Kyle Whittingham. I love the fact they got Cam Rising back. I would feel a little bit better about this pick with them being in the Big 12 title game if I knew without a shadow of a doubt his knee was like good as new, good to go. Still, I think you look at that lettuce he has coming out of the back of that helmet, and that kind of soothes a little bit of your nerves when it comes to breaking that whole thing down. Going back to their schedule, they're at Oklahoma State. They get Arizona at home. Besides that, I think it's all very, very workable. Kansas State, I like a lot. I was very close to putting in the conference title game. But the reason why I have a hard time putting them in Jerry World is the fact that they don't have a ton of returning production on offense, as I mentioned before. The defense could absolutely carry them. And Avery Johnson, I think, is going to be a star. But with it being his first year as the guy at Kansas State, I think it is fair to leave some margin for freshman quarterback moments. First-year starter quarterback moments for Avery Johnson. So in that way, I think that you actually have a team come out of nowhere, a team that I haven't even talked about yet, make the Big 12 title game. It's not Oklahoma State. I think they're going to be a tough out, but I actually don't think they make the conference title game. I don't think it's Arizona. As good as they are, as good as they were last year, I don't think that they duplicate that success in 2024. I think it's Texas Tech that finds their way to Jerry World to meet up with Utah, and they go dancing in the house that Jerry built for a conference championship and for a chance to make the college football playoff, for an auto bid of the college football playoff. Now, I will say this. I think Texas Tech shows up in this game with more than one loss. So for Texas Tech, if you don't win this game, you're not getting in. I think Texas Tech, the reason why I love them so much, outside of the path, because they don't have Utah on the schedule, they don't have Kansas State on the schedule, they're at Arizona, they're at Iowa State, they're at Oklahoma State. I think if they can go 1-2 in that stretch, that's going to be good enough to get into this game. Something that we don't talk about enough with Texas Tech is the way they do their eval process. They may have the best evals in all of college football. They run their whole operation like an NFL team. Like they have a personnel department who goes out and scouts, and then from there, they'll offer the kid, or I think come close to offering the kid, and then the position coach gets a chance to talk to them, look at them, recruit them, and that allows them to really be early on a lot of these kids that Texas Tech would like to have on their roster, and they get a fair amount of them. Taj Brooks is a name that not a lot of people know. 1,500-yard back a season ago for Texas Tech. He's back. Baron Morton, he's back. If for some reason you don't have him for the entirety of the season, Will Hammond is a super talented young gun they have out there also in that quarterback room. Also, these guys will run through a wall for Joey McGuire. They would. And I think that matters in a game like this, in a stretch like this, in a conference like this. So when it comes to this game, though, it's tough to go against Utah, man. It just is. Like Cam Rising, what do we know about him? I already told you, great flow, a lot of success so far during his career at Utah, played in multiple Rose Bowls. All he does as a starting quarterback is win conference titles. Won multiple in the Pac-12 for Utah. I think he gets himself a Big 12 title before he leaves college football. So Utah punches their ticket to the college football playoff, and they are your Big 12 champion. It's going to be it's going to be wacky. It's going to be such a wacky conference to try and keep tabs on. That's going to be one of those conferences that we look up going into November and we're like, gosh dang, man, there are 5 teams that could all have a chance to make it to that conference title game. Going to be a lot of fun, man. Like I said, the appetite for entertainment that the Pac-12 is leaving us with, I think the Big 12 is going to do a lot of work to help appease us in that sense. All right? So, let me know who you have winning the Big 12. Let me know who you have winning the ACC as our prediction week finale rolls right along here, man. We still got our college football playoff field for you. We still got our prediction for the SEC for you. We still have our national championship prediction for you. If you're keeping track at home, Miami and Utah have already locked up college football playoff spots. Okay, so 2 of those 12 are accounted for if you're watching live right now or listening back on podcast. So from the Big 12, let's go to the Big 10. And the Big 10 is obviously a new-look conference, much like it feels like pretty much every other conference in college football this year. The Big 10 is one of those conferences where we think we know a lot because you look at the odds in Vegas. Ohio State has the best odds to win the conference at plus 155. Oregon is second at plus 200. The third best odds to win the conference is plus 500 for Penn State. We think we know a lot about this conference. I'm just here to tell you, that is dangerous. Because if we know anything about college football, it is that expect the unexpected. And when you think you have it all figured out, that's exactly when college football says, come on, I thought you knew me better than that. And the Big Ten may end up doing that because I think when you walk through the other teams in this conference outside of the Ohio States and the Oregons, there's several variables to where if I gave you a answer to those variables in a way that it benefited those specific teams, they immediately become a contender for the conference title. Not that they aren't already, but to kind of make more sense of this, like if I told you Michigan, they're going to get elite quarterback play. Whether it's Davis Warren, Alex Orji, Jack Tuttle. Yes, Jack Tuttle. Now keep an eye on him. 7th-year senior. What do we say about Michigan? At that point, are we like, yeah, I mean, shoot, they might just run it back then and go have a chance to compete for the national championship. Forget the Big Ten. They're going to run the football. They're going to play great defense. Those 2 things are solid. One variable changes the entire game when you talk about Michigan. Penn State, 3rd best odds to win the conference. New OC and Coach Koltenecki, Coach K. What if they get some explosivity on offense? The defense is going to be great. I mean, Abdul Carter's an absolute man-child, hunting quarterbacks on the defensive side of the ball for Penn State. You have one of the best backfields in college football in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. A lot of people talking down on Drew Aller's name. Are we sure he's the problem? Are we sure that maybe they just didn't have the offensive structure and scheme in place to be successful last year? Penn State could absolutely make a run at this thing if you told me they're going to be more explosive offensively. To the same token, USC, we're kind of going down the list here, though, but I think it's fair to say USC, if they get a defense, what do we say about Lincoln Riley? I mean, are we not giving him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to have a good quarterback and a good offense, at the very least, to be competitive? Like, that one variable changes the entire complexion of the Big Ten. In my mind, Iowa, if they get an offense, same thing. Nebraska, if they win close games, same thing. Wisconsin, if Luke Fickell can kind of get that to be a Luke Fickell team his second year out there, and that Phil Longo offense figures it out. Again, we're talking through a lot of hypotheticals and a lot of ifs, but I don't think that you're going much further than like one variable swinging in one of those teams' directions to put them into contention to compete for a conference title game. So while I think that's true, I also think that they have skyscrapers in Las Vegas for a reason. And Las Vegas, man, it's a city out there in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and they built massive skyscrapers. The reason why? They're right a lot. They're right a lot. And so I think you do actually get Ohio State and Oregon, as boring as it may seem as we sit here in August. I keep having to say August instead of July. As we sit here in August, it is what it is. I think those are the 2 best rosters in college football in that conference, if not top 4, top 3 in college football. At the end of the day, we might see this matchup between Ohio State and Oregon I mean, we could see it 3 times in the college football playoff. We'll see. From the regular season to the Big Ten title game to that 3rd time being in the college football playoff. Whoever wins this game, I think, will be the more physical outfit when it comes to the Big Ten championship. I think depth will play a massive factor. There might be some names on both those rosters that we're not talking about right now that end up being massive for them come that game first week of December. I think it's Oregon for 2 reasons. I think they have 2 edges that will allow them to win the Big Ten. The first is, I think that if you're picking a question mark on Ohio State, and question mark's even a harsh term to use, if you're picking an area of their team that you're not 100% sure about, it's the offensive line. Oregon's defensive line is going to be really, really good. They've got depth. They've got dudes in that starting lineup from Mateo Uiagalelei to Jordan Birch to Derek Harmon, the Michigan State transfer, who's like 6'5", 300 some odd pounds. Like, they got some dudes and some sides up there to go with that depth. And then I think the quarterback play, too, I would give the edge to Dylan Gabriel in that game. So is that the case going forward for both of these teams if they find themselves playing in the college football playoff? We'll see. I could also see, honestly, Ohio State beating Oregon in Autzen and then Oregon beating them in the Big Ten championship. But regardless, we're gonna trust our gut here. I think Oregon wins the Big Ten, and I think we see Ohio State and Oregon play at least 2 times heading into that Big Ten championship game. That's going to be a tricky conference, man. Again, that's the one that feels a little bit like, gosh, are we sure? Are we sure that's not too much of a layup? That's not too easy? The other question we're going to answer here in a little bit, how many teams from the Big Ten find their way in? I said it on my social media platforms the other day. I was like, Matt Rule saying 4 teams getting in the college football playoff from that conference is not nearly as crazy as it sounds. Is it that way this year, though? I don't know. I don't know if it's that way this year. But every other year, not that much of a stretch. All right, so let's talk a little SEC here. And the SEC, man, is the deepest conference in college football. I think a lot of times you hear people talk about the SEC being too top-heavy. I don't think that's the case this year. I think the college football playoff will prove that as well. In addition to them just being deep from a roster's perspective, like teams that you're literally going down the line here, 5, 6, 7 teams that are all enormously talented. I think you have the deepest quarterback conference in college football, being the SEC, which is just going to make for a tremendous product on Saturdays for all of us, so we all win from that. When you look at the SEC, you can really make a case for and against just about all of these teams, and both those points, whether it be for or against them, I think you're right, which is kind of a wild place to be, but I think it's kind of where we stand right here going into the 2024 season. Like Georgia, they're the betting favorite. They have the best coach in college football. I think they have one of, if not the best quarterback in college football. You can make an argument for them having the best roster in college football. But if you're betting against Georgia, probably because that schedule is brutal. And you're not hearing any pushback from me about that schedule being brutal, man, because when it just comes to their road games alone, you're at Kentucky, which is a tough place to play, at Bama, at Texas, at Ole Miss. And oh, by the way, you got to play Tennessee as well. Like, it's going to be anything but a cakewalk for Georgia, regardless of how good we believe they are. That is going to be the gauntlet for them, all right? So, again, you can make the case for them, can also very easily, I believe, make the case against them. Now, for Texas, same deal. I love Quinn Ewers. I told y'all yesterday, I think he's winning the Heisman Trophy. I love what they did via the portal, going out and getting Isaiah Bond. I love what they got on the offensive line coming back. I love what they have on the defensive side of the football. I think they're ready for the SEC. I really do. However, you can also make the case like, well, they did lose some pretty key pieces last year. Devondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, 2 All-American caliber defensive linemen. They're gone to the league. Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy. That's darn near 2,000 yards in receiving production. That's gone. How do you replenish that? No, by the way, now, you're in the new conference in the SEC, which is going to be a brand new grind for you. How do you pick yourself up after playing Oklahoma and then you go play Georgia? Like, week after week, that's going to be difficult. Ole Miss, best team Kiffin's ever had, I believe. I don't think that's a stretch. If you're skeptical of them, you could also say, well, hey, I don't know about the portal strategy. Can you really portal in that many guys and have it all work how it's supposed to? Like, we're about to find out here. Missouri, I keep going down the line here. They got the best wide receiver in college football. They had a tremendous year last year, and they got a lot of those key pieces back on offense. What's Missouri going to be? Brady let him cook, man. I told you, one of my favorite players in college football. I love Missouri. They got a very workable schedule. You're making a case against Missouri, though, like they lost their defensive coordinator. They lost a 1,600-yard rusher in Cody Schrader. They lost 40%, give or take, of defensive production from last year. Like, what's Missouri going to be? Again, we keep going back to you can make a case for and against just about all these teams. Alabama, Kalen DeBoer is 104-12, coming off of a national championship berth with Washington. Now, not to knock Washington, but I came on this show many a time and picked against the Huskies. And then many a time I came back here on a Sunday morning or a Tuesday live show and I was like, y'all, I was wrong again on the Huskies. Hey, hand up, I missed. 104-12 all time. That doesn't happen by accident. But what about the defense? A lot of unproven cats. 33% production back from last year's squad. A lot of talent, but to be unproven in the SEC feels a little bit dangerous. Tennessee, you got Nico. Nico time in Knoxville is on and popping, and the folks out there are fired up, and they should be. Dude's got all the physical attributes you could want. Also, he's a little bit twisted psychologically. The fact that he likes playing away games, we'll see. But that's the exact kind of crazy I want my quarterback to have. Defensively, yeah, you're better up front. Brand new secondary. LSU, year 3 Brian Kelly. He has a lot of success in year 3. We've seen that at multiple stops. At Cincinnati, he made a BCS Bowl his 3rd year. At Notre Dame, they made the national championship game his 3rd year. Are we really going to bet against a year 3 Brian Kelly? Yeah, but new quarterback. I love me some Garrett Nussmeier. I told y'all many a time, I think he is one of the best newcomers, rather, in the SEC, if not all of college football. I'm really excited about him. I love the way that he's wired after talking to him at SEC Media Days. Defense, though, are we sure it's actually better? It's fair to be concerned. Even though you brought in a Blake Baker from Missouri, it's fair to have some questions. And so I did that exercise for us just because I think it's very, very it's a very okay process to have some doubts about a lot of these top teams because there's reason for doubt for all these teams. And at the same time, there's also a pretty good reason to believe that they're going to be really freaking good. And you can make a case for, I think, any of these teams being not just college football playoff teams, but potentially SEC title contending teams. So for me, when picking this conference, it comes down to 3 factors: experience, schedule, depth. All right, and you kind of weight those differently for different teams depending on their schedule. But like Georgia, I mentioned how difficult the schedule is. I just think they're built to make a run, man. Like, I do not believe Georgia will have a game where they are out-talented from a roster perspective. That's kind of the end of the story there for me. Yes, the schedule's brutal. Yes, they got to go to Texas. Got to go to Ole Miss. I just think they're built like that, man. I do. Like, I think that Georgia actually finds their way to the SEC championship game unbeaten. That's a bit of a bold statement, but that's how I feel. I think they are that good. I think what they have up front, too, isn't getting talked about enough. Those folks in Athens, man, they love what they have on the offensive line. They love what they have on the offensive line. Defensively now, I understand Will Muschamp took a little bit of a step back. It's still Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart. Y'all, like those are still the directors of the movie. Defense is going to be just fine. Defense will be more than fine. So I think they end up finding their way to the SEC title game. I think they'll play their best football in November, and they will peak at the right time. They got the depth to go the distance. Now, who do they meet in Atlanta? Is it Texas? Is it Bama? I could see that. I could absolutely see that. But you know who I actually see in the SEC title game? Is Ole Miss just chilling there with one loss. We talked about the path for Ole Miss. No Bama, no Texas, no Missouri. You're at LSU, you got Georgia, and you're at Florida. I think they can go 2-1 in that stretch. Transparently, based on me telling you that I think Georgia shows up there undefeated, I think they only lose to Georgia and they find themselves in a rematch in the conference title game, much like in the Big Ten where we have Ohio State and Oregon playing each other for the second time. Now, who wins this one, man? I think Georgia's on a mission. I do, man. I think that they remember vividly falling short in Atlanta. I think that team feels like if they were healthy, they would have won that conference title game a year ago. I think they believe that they have unfinished business. And Kirby Smart now does not have to manufacture any juice for this team. Doesn't have to tell them people are doubting them. Like, they're not worried about the external noise so much as how much they have missed on their internal expectations. And I think that's going to benefit them. I think that's going to ultimately allow them to have success and win the SEC in 2024. Now, I get it. It's hard to beat anybody twice. We said that about Ohio State and Oregon. That's absolutely true. However, I think you give Kirby Smart 4 quarters of film to watch on your football team against his football team from the regular season. I think that is diabolical, to say the least, for the Dogs. So I think Georgia ends up locking up that 4th college football playoff spot, I guess based on this show. I'm not telling you they're the 4th seed. I'm telling you, if you're watching live, that's the 4th playoff spot with the bye that we're talking through here. And they get themselves into the college football playoff, and they will be the 1 seed. It's going to be exciting, man. It's a new era. It's a new era. It's a new age. And it's going to be a lot of fun, man. So about to jump into our college football playoff field. Hey, it's a special day around here at On 3 headquarters. It's our 3rd anniversary. It's our 3rd birthday. And so I'll just say this. It is an absolute pleasure and a privilege to walk into work and just know that I'm working for good people, work for a brand and a mission I can absolutely support, identify with, and get behind. And I'm just excited for the future, man. So for all y'all that have been with us here for these last 3 years, thank you for that. I promise you the best is yet to come. I am very, very fortunate that my key card works every single day to get in this building and to be a part of everything that's going on here. And we appreciate y'all making this whole thing go. So happy 3rd birthday to On 3. And here's to many, many more, and y'all being a part of it. So if you got a little birthday cake at home for On 3, man, shouts to y'all. Send us a picture of that, and we'll celebrate together. Okay, so we walked through our conference champions. Who do we have in our college football playoff field? We'll go one by one here. I told you at the end of the last segment, I think Georgia is the number 1 team in college football. I think they go wire to wire. I think they're undefeated. As your SEC champion, they are the number 1 seed. Now, the 2nd seed, I could see Oregon being anywhere from 13-0 to 12-1, depending on how that first game goes with Ohio State. I think Oregon's the 2nd best team in college football, according to the college football playoff field. Your Big Ten champ, the quarterback they have makes the difference with Dylan Gabriel. The skill players they have are as good as anywhere else in the country. This is something that's not getting talked about too, man. Dan Lanning, only been a head coach for 2 years. He gets another year better, kind of refines the process, refines the system. I like Oregon to be the number 2 seed in the college football playoff field as your Big Ten champ. At number 3, you got Miami. They'll be your 3rd seed, the ACC champ. I think they're 12-1. Again, that game to start the year in Gainesville, I think is going to be very difficult. It's a tough place to start out your career for Miami if you're Cam Ward. But even so, man, I think they run the table in the ACC. I think they're your ACC champ. The Cam Ward factor now is very, very real. So Miami, they win the ACC. They are your 3rd seed. The 4th seed that gets themselves a bye is, of course, the Big 12 champ, Cam Rising in Utah. Utah ball is back, baby. Kyle Whittingham ball is back. Last year, they were dinged up across the board. I didn't even talk about Keithy, the tight end they get back this year to go with Cam Rising. They're going to be on a mission, much like the rest of these teams in this top 4 that I've already walked through. Utah will win the Big 12. They will be the 4th team into the college football playoff, or the 4th seed, rather. So that's it, right? That's all we got to worry about. If we were talking about how college football worked the last couple of years, that would be the case, more likely than not. However, that's not how college football works this upcoming season. We got a 12-team field now. So I walked through those 4 conference champions. There's a 5th conference champion that we're going to talk about a little bit later from the G5. Who gets the at-large bids? There's 7 of them, or 6 of them rather, I suppose. Excuse me. There is 7 because you got 5 conference champs. The 5 seed in the college football playoff will be Ole Miss. They're the SEC runner-up, just straight up. They're going to have 2 losses. Both of them will be to the number 1 team in America, the Georgia Bulldogs. Pretty cut and dry there. I love what Jackson Dart brings to the table. I love the way that Lane Kiffin has built this roster. They are much more impressive now off the bus. To quote Lane Kiffin, they're going to be a force. Go ahead and put them down as the number 5 seed in this college football playoff. At number 6, you're going to have the Big Ten runner-up, Ohio State. For the sake of this conversation, I'm going to have them as a 2-loss team, Even with that being said, they'll only have one loss in the regular season. That roster is still as good as any in college football. Just get them in the dance. That's all I'm saying now. Just get them in the dance is what I'm thinking if I am an Ohio State fan. Florida State, the ACC runner-up at number 7. I think that they have 2 losses in this situation. Again, similar to Ohio State, similar to Ole Miss. I mean, they just lost the rematch, which would be a little bit wild, admittedly, having 3 teams from 5, 6, and 7 that lost in the regular season and in the conference title game to the same team. It would be wild, but that's college football. College football is a little bit wild. I think that would be very affirming, just for the record here, for Florida State, based on what happened last year and based on what Mike Norvell has done since getting to Tallahassee. DJU, hat tip to all the haters, baby. That's all I would say about DJU. Now at number 8, you got a 10-2 Texas squad. I think their strength of schedule puts them at 8, which will make a little bit more sense here when I tell you who's at 9. Steve Sarkisian and Quinn Ewers is still a dynamic duo. Say what you want about the new production they have to work with on the offensive side of the football. Say what you want about who they have to replace up front. This is still a roster that can make a run and can compete for a national championship. Just because you lose to Georgia and slip up somewhere else on the schedule does not mean that we have any reservations about Texas or don't think they're still going to be a problem for the rest of college football. So Texas is at number 8. At number 9 now, got a 10-2 Notre Dame. And just so we're on the same page here, just to be honest with y'all, this is the team that I'm most nervous about. Riley Leonard is super talented. I don't know about his consistency. I am banking on Mike Denbrock equipping him to be a better passer, a more consistent passer, and playing to his skill set. And then the rest of this roster, especially from the skill players on the offense side of the football, propelling him and allowing them to find their way into the college football playoff. So I think that the strength of schedule going back to Texas puts them ahead of Notre Dame. It'll probably be thin margins, but even so, you give Texas the nod at 8. Notre Dame is going to be there at 9. At number 10, now this is where the SEC reference points kind of kick in. I got Alabama. They'll be 10-2. I think they have losses to Georgia, which is, again, the number 1 team in America, and at LSU. I think that Notre Dame will have a better second loss than Alabama, which I think will equip them to be just ahead of Bama in this college football playoff field. Similar to what I said about Ohio State, similar to what I said about Texas, just get him in the dance. Because if we know anything about Jalen Milroe, man, he is very intrinsically motivated, but if you give him some external juice to work with too, give him some extra chip on his shoulder, as if he needs that, he'll be out for blood. And that defense at this point in time, you would hope, is starting to gel a little bit more, and the back end is a little bit more on their P's and Q's, and maybe Alabama makes themselves a run with Kalen DeBoer in his first season. At number 11, I got Tennessee. I put them behind Bama because I think they have one loss to Bama. Their other loss coming against Georgia. Y'all, if we're just going to call a spade here, like those are the 2 best losses in college football. Now, you still have 2 losses. You didn't win your conference. You weren't even in your conference title game, but those are 2 really good losses. So I have Tennessee at 11. If you have them higher, given that resume, I don't have a problem with it. I'll put them there at number 11 and feel pretty good doing it. So those are your 7 at-large bids. Remember, we have one more auto bid from the conference championships. And Liberty is getting a lot of juice right now, and deservedly so, man. Caden Salter is a stud. I love what they have coming back for them. I love the way that they do things offensively. I think Jamie Chadwell's a stud as well. However, Liberty has got to go to Boone, North Carolina, and play App State. You know who else has to go to Boone, North Carolina and play App State? James Madison. I think the fact that both those games are at home is massive for App State. I think App State will have the key head-to-head over Liberty, and I think that App State is also going to win the Fun Belt, obviously, by them being a G5 conference champion. So I think your 12th team in this college football playoff is going to be Appalachian State. So to recap it here, your 4 conference champs, 1 through 4, that all will get a bye. Georgia at 1, Oregon at 2, Miami at 3, and Utah at 4. Now 5 through 11, your at-large bids, you're going to get Ole Miss, Ohio State at 6, Florida State at 7, Texas at 8, Notre Dame at 9, Alabama at 10, and Tennessee at 11, with Appalachian State from the Fun Belt getting your 12th seed as the G5 bid. So I mentioned something earlier in this segment, SEC reference points. What does that mean? Some people will call it SEC bias. I just call it the SEC having really good teams. They're going to be highly ranked. The losses from the Southeastern Conference are going to reflect well on the teams that make it in at 10-2. Because when you talk about who could be left out, I'm not so sure that Penn State won't be 10-2. I don't trust the offense unequivocally just yet to put them in this thing. But even if Penn State does go 10-2, let's say they lose to Ohio State and let's say they lose to Wisconsin, I don't think that gets you in over a Tennessee with a loss to Bama and Georgia, or to Alabama who has a loss to Georgia and LSU. Just the way I feel about it. I could be wrong. Also, I think Penn State may end up losing a third game, just if we're going to be 100% clear here. But going back to reference points, when you compare losses, you compare quality losses, which is an ugly word. I get it when it comes to the college football playoff and all that vernacular. I think that's going to benefit the SEC. So if you're keeping track at home, I got 5 SEC teams in the dance. Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas, Alabama, and Tennessee. I just think that's the way it's going to work out. And before you say SEC bias now, I grew up on the West Coast. I went to school in the Northeast. The SEC bias tag, I believe, is a little bit harder to pin on me, if we're just going to be honest there. So I think Penn State just misses the cut. I think Missouri from the SEC also misses the cut. I don't know about how they're going to replace that defensive production and the one-score losses from last year. They had 4 of them. I don't think that translates again to this upcoming season in terms of how many one-score games they end up winning. Clemson, I love Clemson. I could see them finding their way backdooring into this thing, but I don't know that you get 3 ACC teams. Not to knock the ACC, I just don't know they'll have the resume or the overall juice within that conference to get a third team in, with Miami and Florida State being the 2. So that is my college football playoff field. Let me know how y'all feel about it. Let me know who you have in your college football playoff field in the comment section, but also make sure you leave me a subscription as well, or leave us a subscription as well, on the On3 YouTube channel as we jump headfirst into the beautiful thing that is the 2024 college football season. How about that, man? Perfect bracket so far. So far, every single team that we have in the college football playoff field is undefeated, and their college football playoff hopes are still intact as we sit here the first day of August. What a wonderful thing. So this segment now is the very elusive, very rare horizontal note here. I'm going to hold this up to the camera. If you're listening on podcast, don't worry about it. We drew up our bracket here with admittedly some subpar handwriting, but that's how we're going to do this thing. Who ends up winning the national championship? We have our playoff field for you. If you've seen that video, shouts to y'all. If you haven't, it's okay. We'll flash up our playoff field here for you. But before we do that, make sure you're subscribed to the On3 YouTube channel. College football is a year-round sport. We cover it as such, from transfer portal to recruiting, and the beautiful thing that is the games that are played in the fall. So make sure you're locked in here. We appreciate you for that. About to jump into a brand new normal of the college football world. Want y'all a part of it, make sure you are subscribed. All right. So let's kind of set the stage here for you. Here's our 12-team field when it comes to the college football playoff. We have got Notre Dame at Texas to start. You got App State at Ole Miss. You got Alabama at Florida State. You got Tennessee at Ohio State. And then you also have a number of other teams that get byes. And those teams that get byes are Georgia and Utah, Oregon and Miami. And that's obviously going to be a lot of fun to see who they end up drawing from this college football playoff field. So with 12 teams, admittedly, it's a lot to keep track of. It's going to be great when it gets here, when it comes to the viewing product. So we'll lock in here. We'll just kind of walk you through who we think ends up winning the whole darn thing. We're going to kind of walk this thing through game by game. So let's start with round 1. Notre Dame at Texas. First of all, the fact that we get a college football playoff game in Austin, Texas, with 2 historic brands, that is going to be cinematic. I cannot wait for that. That'll be beautiful. That's going to be awesome. All right, I'll say that. For the sake of time here, without giving you the full 10-minute breakdown of the game, because we don't even know if this game is actually going to happen just yet, I think in this matchup, the Texas firepower would be too much for Notre Dame. Now, if you're Marcus Freeman, though, making the college football playoff, I think is a tremendous, tremendous watermark for them, his 3rd year out there in South Bend. But I do think Texas wins that football game, and they advance to play Georgia. Now, App State and Ole Miss, I love App State. I love the G5. Straight up, though, I think Ole Miss is more talented. They'll win that football game. The other round one matchups, Alabama at Florida State. I think Alabama and the fuel they'll have coming into this game, finding their way into the back door of the college football playoff. Jalen Milroe, Kalen DeBoer, they'll scheme it up. I like Alabama to win that football game, so they advance to play Oregon. And then the last round one game, you got Tennessee at Ohio State. Also, y'all, college football playoff games at Florida State and in Columbus, Ohio. And the one I just mentioned in Oxford, Mississippi between App State and Ole Miss, like that's gonna be very, very cool. And I have been on the front lines of saying, hey, I would love to keep the college football playoff at 4 teams. Just my opinion. When we get to this, you won't hear me complaining at all. All right, so we'll leave that there. I have Tennessee losing to Ohio State. I think the secondary for Ohio State will match up well with Tennessee's offense, and I like Ohio State to win that football game. They will advance to play Miami. So going back to the top of this thing, you'll get Texas and Georgia. This will be back and forth. It'll be a neutral site. I think Georgia's defense will be too much for Texas on that day. And you go to Ole Miss and Utah. Ole Miss will be the lower-seeded team in this game. I think Ole Miss beats Utah. I think they'll be too athletic for Utah. I think they have a newfound physicality that will serve them well in this game. So then you have Georgia and Ole Miss matching up as one of those Final Four teams. Now you have Alabama and Oregon on the other side of the bracket. I think that Oregon is going to scheme it up against that unexperienced Alabama secondary. Now, we'll see how that secondary formulates over the course of the season. As we sit here in August, I just think the playmakers for Oregon are going to be too much for what would be a perceived weakness for Alabama when it comes to this 2024 season. You have Miami and Ohio State. I love Miami. I love Cam Ward. However, I think that Ohio State and the experience of a Will Howard pays massive dividends in a big spot like this. He's played in conference title games before. He will have played now in 2 conference title games heading into this game. I think he'll handle it well. I think the depth and the physicality of Ohio State, having both Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins running the football, I think they end up winning that football game. And so your Final Four teams are Oregon, Ohio State. They play each other in the semis. And then Georgia and Ole Miss playing each other in the semis as well. Again, this is just the way that we see it shaken out. Wild and wacky. You'll have 4 teams that will have both played each other, from Georgia and Ole Miss to Oregon and Ohio State. They'll be their 3rd time playing each other. 3rd time. 3rd time in the same college football season for the semis. When it comes to Georgia and Ole Miss and who wins that football game with a chance to go to the national championship game, it is so difficult to beat anybody 3 times. Like, that is unheard of, quite frankly. I have one note on that game, and it is one name, and it's Kirby. I think that's the difference. I love Lane Kiffin. I love Jackson Dart. I love the roster talent that they now have at Ole Miss. But I think that Georgia, again, getting more data, the more times you play Georgia, I don't think it actually benefits you. I think it benefits Georgia and Kirby Smart. So I think they win that game. They punch their ticket to the national title game. Again, Oregon and Ohio State. Do I really have Oregon beating Ohio State 3 times? That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, right? We're a little bit ridiculous on this show. Just full transparency. That's kind of how we operate. So I think Oregon beats Ohio State. Again, quarterback play. And arguably that bye, with Oregon being more fresh, makes the difference. We have Oregon and Georgia playing each other in the national championship game. Now, who wins this national title game? Dan Lanning, a Kirby Smart disciple of sorts. If you remember correctly, Dan Lanning's first game at Oregon was against Georgia in Atlanta, so it's kind of poetic they have to run it back in Atlanta for the national title game. Oregon will have better players than when they met Georgia the first time around. Make no mistake about it. They will be a much better unit. However, the experience factor for Kirby Smart in national title games, Carson Beck in big stages, the depth on the line of scrimmage that I think slightly favors Georgia in this game, I think the consistency of Carson Beck ends up making the difference, and the versatility of Georgia makes the difference. I think Georgia beats Oregon and wins the national championship. So that's our pick for you. We got Georgia and Oregon meeting up in the national title game in Atlanta. Have to imagine that Georgia fans will travel just fine for that one, and Georgia wins the whole darn thing. So there you have it, man. We've called our shot. I'll be honest, I don't know if I feel tremendous about a team beating the other team 3 times in a row, from Ole Miss and Georgia and Oregon and Ohio State. Georgia obviously beating Ole Miss 3 times in a row based on our prediction. That's how we feel about it. We're calling our shot. And when we have our perfect bracket a little bit later in the year, or I guess early next year, we will revisit this and we'll go from there. Appreciate y'all being tuned in live. We have an ad read for you before we get out of here. The Hard Count is brought to y'all by our friends over at Rhoback. So you guys all know how much I love Rhoback. I wear them all the time. If you tuned into my Instagram stories during the fall, it's me out there on the porch just doing a video question and answer with y'all via my Instagram. So subscribe or follow me there at JD Piquel on Instagram. They have the best polos on the market, best hoodies on the market. And going back to those stories, if you're watching those, I'm always wearing something Rhoback, all right? Whether it's a hoodie, a long sleeve, a T-shirt, whatever it is, Rhoback is typically our choice whenever we're not in the office. The moisture wicking technology and 4-way stretch makes it easy to move in while keeping you feeling fresh. Rhoback also has everyday shorts that are perfect for pairing. They're comfortable, have an elastic waistband, great fabric that is made to stretch. They have also released a ton of new products between the comfortable T-shirts I mentioned to you, bathing suits. Rhoback is ready for the warm weather, and they're ready to launch us into the fall as well. Rhoback has also been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with college stars Jalen Milroe, Cade Klubnik, among others. They're becoming the go-to brand for college athletes. So, hear this if you hear nothing else that I'm saying. Use the code JD, just the letters J and D, no periods, on Rhoback.com for a generous 20% off for all new customers through the end of this week. That's spelled RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, hoodies, bathing suits, whatever you want. Rhoback has got you. Make sure you save some money using code JD at Rhoback.com. Okay, so the fun does not stop here. If you're watching live right now, go over to the college football Reddit page. We have an AMA starting in, give or take, 29 minutes. So lock in over there. Want to hear from you all over there. We appreciate y'all making this show what it is, man. We've now called our shot. The hay is in the barn. We have made our predictions for the 2024 season. And you are all now very much so entitled and welcome to hold us to those as we go on throughout the rest of the college football season. But hey, we love y'all, man. It's college football season. It's finally here. Let's make the most of it. Let's have the best college football season in history. For Nick Brake running the show, for myself, JD Piquel, we appreciate y'all. We love y'all. We are extremely grateful for y'all. We're going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all.